Hello, my friend, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Daily. My name is Aaron Machbitz. The biggest question heading into WrestleMania 41 at this very moment is, will The Rock be at WrestleMania 41? Considering he was a huge part of the build-up to last year's WrestleMania and was a huge part at WrestleMania 40, people were really hoping the final boss and the heel run he was having and the feud potentially with Cody Rhodes, or even starting a new feud with Roman Reigns, was going to build up to WrestleMania 41. But then you saw how weird and odd he interacted with everyone in that promo on the debut episode of Raw on Netflix, and there's really been nothing. I mean, a lot of people think that that final boss heel character that The Rock was presenting had so much longevity and so much steam that it really could have been Cody Rhodes versus The Rock at WrestleMania 41, or you even do that flip and you have Roman Reigns versus The Rock at WrestleMania 41. But at this very moment, it really does seem like The Rock will not be participating in WrestleMania 41. And now that I start to think about it, there's no real place for him, especially if some of these things that I'm predicting might go the way they go, right? Because if we have John Cena winning the Elimination Chamber, then we have John Cena facing Cody Rhodes in the main event. Then right now it's shaking out to be Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins versus CM Punk. But CM Punk has this favor from Paul Heyman, and we're hoping that he might finish his story similar to Cody Rhodes finishing his story. So he's going to call in the favor from Paul Heyman and get him interjected into that match with Cody Rhodes and John Cena. Now that's a triple threat. Now you get the history-filled, jam-packed match of Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. We're probably leading towards Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens. We'll talk about Drew McIntyre in a little bit, but it looks like he might face Damian Priest, and you have all of these big-time matchups. Where would you fit The Rock in, and where would you replace him, and also what pieces would you move around? So maybe it's not the time. Maybe we'll start post-WrestleMania 41 to start building up to eventually have him sort of pass the torch to Roman Reigns or finish that feud, that nasty feud he started with Cody Rhodes as his final boss character. But I really do believe at this very moment, and again, I could be wrong because I get a lot of predictions wrong, but I do believe that at this very moment, we're not going to see The Rock at WrestleMania 41. And now, speaking of Drew McIntyre has been recently discussed based on some of his crybaby sort of characteristics, right? We saw him leave the Royal Rumble crying in fumes. Oh my God, things didn't go my way. And then he continues to sort of bitch and moan about some of the things going on. Then he gets moved to SmackDown, and what's going to happen? Well, what's great here is that everyone on the internet, in the internet wrestling community, has bought into this Drew McIntyre thing of being a crybaby. He's just doing his job really well. And this is where sort of the internet gets kind of fun with wrestling, right? Back in the day when you didn't have all of this stuff, you just there was a lot of different surprises. You thought what you thought. Was that a shoot? Was that a work? Is he really mad? Is he really upset? Is there really heat backstage? Oh my God, what's happening? You just can explore your imagination. Now every rumor, every prediction, everything that might happen ends up on the internet wrestling community, and people just talk about it to death, and they sort of work themselves from it not being real to it being real to it being a shoot to not being a shoot to there's actual heat, there's not heat. There's so many different things going on. And when that happens, especially when people go really in on these rumors that exist on the internet, that means that WWE, or specifically the performer, has done their job, like Drew McIntyre. And again, I've said this over and over on this show, but Drew McIntyre is still underrated for who he is and how he performs and the character he has and everything that he represents as a professional wrestler. And if we just go back to a few nights ago on Friday Night SmackDown, we saw this thing with LA Knight. One thing I want to point out about LA Knight is that he mentioned mental health, he mentioned men's mental health, and he mentioned crying as a form to release our emotions. All of those things are important. Talking about your mental health is strong, it's courageous, it's vulnerable, especially as men. More discussion about mental health, the better, especially when we see these high performers and these men expressing their emotions about how joyous and proud of themselves they are about reaching this moment, and the fans and all of these sorts of things. I mean, wrestling is driven on emotion, and it's about taking care of our mental health in regards to that. And so it's a beautiful thing that LA Knight did. And then you get into this match, and people in the internet wrestling community are saying that Drew McIntyre, LA Knight are shooting. Like, they don't even know what that word means. And so when that stuff happens, it's so good for the product, because really what wrestling is about, it's about suspending your belief. And when we can make people believe in these small little nooks and crannies of the internet of wrestling, or everything is shared and all these sorts of things, it just makes it that much better. It makes it that much more real. I mean, recently we saw this also with Alexa Bliss. Everyone thought contract, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I was one, I predicted it. I said on this show that she's having contract issues. Who knows if we're going to see her at the Royal Rumble. Boom, she shows up at the Royal Rumble. Biggest pop of the night, signed a 5-year contract. So it's good and bad to have all of these internet wrestling communities talking about these rumors and predictions all the time, because they can get so far-fetched if you just latch on to one thing, but also can ruin some big surprises and things of that nature. So it's good and bad, just like sort of everything has his good characteristics and his bad characteristics. But Drew McIntyre and LA Knight did a great job of really going in on that and making it look as vicious and as real as possible, because that's the point of professional wrestling. It's supposed to suspend your belief. You think it's real. You get attached to these characters. You're emotionally driven by them, and then they can do whatever they want going forward. Now, I don't think that it should be Drew McIntyre versus LA Knight at WrestleMania. I don't think that's a big enough feud. I think, yes, we go all in on Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest, big man versus big man. You elevate that match going towards WrestleMania, have a great feud, very intense, very passionate, and I think that's the spot for Drew McIntyre. Also, wouldn't mind if Drew McIntyre, maybe post-WrestleMania, post-SummerSlam later in the year, is the one that dethrones Cody Rhodes, especially on SmackDown, because I do think that Drew McIntyre deserves his flowers and a really good championship run to sort of crown him as the guy that's really, really done a good job, again, of carrying the company in tough times and COVID times and all these sorts of things, and he deserves those flowers. So shout out to Drew McIntyre. You're not really a crybaby. I appreciate your work, and thanks for doing what you do. And we'll end this video with who is going to be, speaking of Drew McIntyre and what potentially he could do moving forward, we'll end this video with a 2025 breakout star. Now, I'm going to say this might be a hot take, and then I'll get to my breakout star, but I think Penta, people are super high on him. They absolutely love him right now. He's had a great debut. The presentation is great. He looks great, all these sorts of things, but I think his character and the buzz he has can't carry this momentum, and he's going to fizzle out in 6 months. You heard it here first. On February 10th, 2025, I said within 6 months of his debut, and he debuted the second episode of the new Raw on Netflix, within 6 months, his character's going to fizzle out, and he's just going to be another mid-card guy having random matches, doing random shit. And I think that. Now, I'd love to be proven wrong and he becomes the superstar that WWE thinks he can be, but I just don't think that'll happen based on many factors. Probably not based on him, but just based on booking and all these sorts of things that might happen going into him fizzling out. But with the presentation, with the way he's been booked, and potentially with the way he can talk and maybe interject himself into a real passionate feud, I might be wrong. But that's what I'm saying. And then I think my 2025 breakout star is going to be Bron Breaker and Chad Gable. Those guys are going to break out in 2025. Bron Breaker already has the IC title. I see him being elevated past that, maybe not in 2025, but I see him becoming a world champion in 2026. And I think Chad Gable has a big-time IC title or even United States Championship run, depending on where he wins it, going in 2025. And he maybe has a big-time feud with Penta because he's trying to beat this Lucha thing. That's where he's going. So maybe that's the feud that draws both of them out, that makes them both stars. And so it could be wrong about Penta, especially if he gets that big-time feud with Chad Gable. And I think those guys are going to break out in 2025. That's all I have for you today in today's video. A lot of good stuff in here. Let me know what you think by commenting below. Anything, your thoughts, your predictions, your rumors, things you didn't agree with, things you did agree with. And then make sure you subscribe and like this video and share it with every single wrestling fan that you know in the world. And I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.